They were considered the most formidable warriors of their era, devout, silent, and lethal. Yet, beneath their armor, rituals, and the myths surrounding them, something profound stirred. This was not in France or Rome, but in Jerusalem, directly beneath the site where Solomon's temple once stood. Within the silence of centuries, beneath the dome and the mount, they tunneled, excavated, and seemingly vanished into the bedrock. When they re-emerged, they offered no explanations, not a single scroll, not a word, only a sudden, inexplicable surge in their power, wealth, and a deeper understanding of secrets. They consistently refused to disclose their findings. What precisely did they uncover, and why, even after all this time, does no one dare to speak of it? No other treasure has captured the imagination quite like the lost hoard of the Knights Templar. Gold is a possibility, relics perhaps. However, intertwined with this enduring obsession lies a more peculiar and perilous theory, that their true treasure was never removed from Jerusalem. It was, in fact, never intended to leave, because it transcended mere treasure. It was something ancient, and it remains there to this day. Now, pause and take a breath. We are about to descend through layers of dust and time, navigating the secrets intricately layered like sediment beneath the holy city. Our journey will take us past Roman ruins, Byzantine mosaics, Crusader stonework, and through the profound silence where the Templars once walked, prayed, and excavated. This narrative does not focus on symbols carved in cathedrals or vaults in Paris. This is the story unfolding beneath your feet, beneath Jerusalem, and beneath the known world. You will perceive the oppressive weight of the stone, the stale chill of subterranean air, and the palpable hum of secrets that have yet to die. Some of these secrets resonate in Arabic, others in Latin. Most communicate only in whispers, if at all. Yet, one truth persistently echoes. The Templars possessed a profound understanding, and whatever they discovered, they meticulously concealed. Before we delve deeper into these shadows, consider subscribing to ensure you do not miss any historical secrets that have seemingly been relegated to oblivion. Picture yourself standing on the Temple Mount on a scorching afternoon. The sky above the dome of the rock is an almost violent shade of blue. The golden shimmer of the dome catches your eye, yet your gaze is drawn downwards to what lies beneath your feet. This particular plot of land is among the most fiercely protected and politically sensitive in human history. Despite this, in the early 12th century, a small group of foreign knights somehow obtained permission not only to reside here but also to excavate. The Order of the Knights Templar established their inaugural headquarters atop this mount, utilizing the ruined Al-Aqsa Mosque as their base. Ostensibly, this appeared to be a pragmatic decision, as the building stood on the precise location believed to be the former Temple of Solomon. However, why would a newly formed military order, comprising only a few members sworn to poverty, establish camp in a place fraught with religious volatility and archaeological peril? A well-documented historical fact is that from approximately 1119 to 1129, the earliest Templar Knights occupied this site. During this decade, while the rest of Jerusalem buzzed with reconstruction and conflict, they undertook no notable military campaigns, acquired no vast estates, and made no public declarations of recovering relics or wealth. Their presence was quietly maintained beneath the surface. Contemporary Muslim chroniclers observed their unusual activities with a mixture of suspicion and dismissiveness. They were seen frequently entering and exiting subterranean spaces. Stones were hauled, and tunnels were extended, yet almost no records exist regarding their discoveries. No journals, no inventories, and no proud pronouncements of sacred recoveries, just an echoing, suspicious silence. The Crusaders referred to the dome of the rock itself as Templum Domini, the Temple of the Lord, believing it to stand atop the original Holy of Holies. In their view, it represented the most sacred point on earth. Employing a monk warrior's logic, the Templars likely reasoned that if anything of value had endured through the centuries, it would be situated directly beneath this divine axis. An often overlooked, obscure detail is found in architectural sketches from the early Crusader period. Several of these depict not only the surface layout of the mosque, but also include shadowy notations of underground corridors and sealed recesses beneath it. A particularly peculiar notation appears in a 12th century rendering, a Hebrew letter Tet, symbolic of hidden good, marked in the lower quadrant beside what appears to be a blocked shaft. This minute flourish suggests a past belief that something holy was interred below. It is acknowledged that not all historians concur that excavations even transpired. Some argue that the notion of such digging is a later embellishment, possibly originating from Templar myth-making in the wake of their subsequent accumulation of wealth and secrecy. Conversely, others point to the abrupt surge in Templar political favor shortly after this 10-year period. The once obscure brotherhood received formal recognition by the Church and began acquiring land and gold at an unprecedented rate. What catalyzed this transformation? Could it be that during their quiet decade beneath the Temple Mount, they uncovered something, a relic, a vault, a document so potent and undeniable that it became their very foundation, not merely in stone, but in destiny? There is also a practical consideration that continues to intrigue scholars. The Temple Mount is extensively permeated with cisterns, aqueducts, and forgotten Roman channels, many of which remained unmapped during the medieval era. Yet, the Templars navigated this subterranean network with uncanny precision, as if guided by records or maps that should not have existed. This raises a pertinent question. If the Templars selected this location for mystical reasons, was their decision based on faith or on pre-existing knowledge? Was it prophecy, or was it a memory, passed down, of a vault no longer indicated on any surface map? As you inhale the arid air and envision armored figures disappearing through hidden trapdoors in the floor, you are reminded of a prior whisper. Their foundation was not constructed upon the mount, but beneath it. Their arrival was devoid of fanfare. No more than 9 men, all seasoned warriors, yet clad in modest robes rather than shining armor. No banners heralded their presence, nor trumpets welcomed them into Jerusalem, only scorching stone streets and hushed whispers. These were the original Templars, Hugues de Payens, Godfrey de Saint-Omer, and 7 others, who came not to conquer, but to uncover. It was 1119 when they pledged themselves to protect pilgrims journeying to the Holy Land. In truth, they guarded little. The roads remained perilous, and their numbers were insufficient for significant patrols. Yet, they were welcomed into the very heart of the city, granted quarters in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, an already audacious gesture, considering the sensitivity of its location on the Temple Mount. However, what transpired next was even more extraordinary. According to multiple independent sources, these 9 knights resided in Jerusalem for nearly a decade without engaging in any battles. Instead, they would disappear for hours, sometimes days, beneath their headquarters. Workers were discreetly hired, stone was moved under the cloak of night, and tunnels began to wind into the earth like roots. These men were not engaged in religious study. They were relentlessly digging. One firm historical fact supports this. The Temple Mount has long harbored an extensive network of ancient tunnels and cavities, some dating back to Herodian times and even earlier. While later excavation records by British engineers in the 19th century would map portions of this labyrinth, it is clear that significant voids already existed, spaces that could be expanded or exploited by those with a specific motivation. Here, a curious anecdote emerges. A 12th century Syrian chronicler wrote of foreign monks who moved through the ground like ants beneath the dome. Although many have dismissed this as poetic exaggeration, this phrasing suggests more than idle curiosity. It implies a systematic, purposeful search, not a random or reckless one. Now, let us introduce a more controversial element. In the writings of William of Tyre, the influential chronicler of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, he barely mentions the Templars in their formative years. He appears to avoid them entirely, offering only vague commentary on their later emergence. This absence of detail, coming from a man who documented nearly everything, has raised questions among modern scholars. Was he instructed to omit certain information, or did he simply not comprehend their activities? A theory persists, whispered in academic circles. The original 9 Templars were not merely guardians, they were seekers. They arrived with specific knowledge of a location, a point beneath the mount where something was hidden, something connected not only to Christianity, but to a far older lineage of sacred objects once housed in Solomon's temple. You can almost visualize them by torchlight, robes tied at the waist, tools in hand, their skin covered in dirt. They were not common treasure hunters. They were initiates of a new order, searching not for gold, but for confirmation, for evidence of something long suspected. Then, around 1128, a dramatic shift occurred. The Templars abruptly reappeared in Europe, not as a struggling band of monks, but as an officially endorsed military order, personally blessed by the Pope. Land grants flowed in, and donations flooded their coffers. Suddenly, Kings heeded their counsel, and clergy offered deference. This transformation was so sudden and drastic that historians continue to grapple with its underlying cause. A lesser-known piece of correspondence from Count Fulk of Anjou, who later became King of Jerusalem, makes an oblique reference to the Templars' acquisition of divine memory. While cryptic, this phrase implies the retrieval of knowledge, not merely relics or riches. It aligns with a recurring theme found in later Templar traditions, that they were custodians not only of artifacts, but of sacred understanding, truths buried by time and empire. However, the question that remains unresolved is this: why would 9 knights, lacking official funding, excavation experience, and explicit authority, dedicate 10 years to digging beneath one of the world's most volatile religious sites, unless they were following a map? And if they possessed such a map, who provided it to them? The notion that someone, somewhere, preserved ancient knowledge of the vaults beneath Jerusalem is more than mere speculation. Rabbinic tradition speaks of priestly lineages who maintained records even after the destruction of the Second Temple. Early Christian sects valued apocryphal maps and coded lineages. Islamic mystics recounted tales of treasure chambers guarded by silence and stone beneath the mount. The convergence of these narratives is uncanny. And here is the anticipated callback. Remember those peculiar notations from Crusader-era maps, symbols hinting at blocked shafts and holy geometries? If such diagrams existed prior to the Templars' arrival, perhaps their mission was not exploratory at all. Perhaps it was surgical. They were not digging aimlessly, they were verifying. And perhaps, just perhaps, they discovered precisely what they had been sent to confirm. There exists a room within the Vatican that no tourist will ever witness. It is devoid of stained glass and soaring arches, featuring only rows upon rows of black-bound ledgers. Behind these are sealed crates that, reputedly, no one has touched in centuries. The narrative suggests that within these boxes lie fragments of items recovered not from Rome or France, but from Jerusalem, things that were never intended to leave the Holy Land, items the Templars found and never discussed. This segment of the mystery hinges on a peculiar silence, not an absence, but an active avoidance. For a military order that would later meticulously inventory everything from horses to hairbrushes, their first 10 years reveal almost no mention of any significant relics recovered from the Temple Mount. There is nothing about chalices, no bones of saints, not even a chipped coin from the First Temple period. Yet, their actions suggest otherwise. One well-established fact is that by the mid-12th century, the Templars possessed several unspecified religious items noted in the registry of Clairvaux Abbey, items never publicly displayed or traced back to any known source. Among these was an object referred to only as lignum, the Latin word for wood, without further clarification. Some have speculated it was a fragment of the true cross, while others suggest it was something older, connected to pre-Christian rituals, possibly even First Temple worship. The records are maddeningly opaque. Obscure details emerge through secondhand sources. A Coptic manuscript discovered in the 1800s, now residing on a neglected shelf in Cairo, mentions the white-robed ones who carried with them a brass vessel inscribed with stars, taken from the place where the well weeps beneath the dome. This passage, easily dismissed by some as monastic allegory, becomes more compelling when juxtaposed with a peculiar item photographed in the 1930 seconds by a French priest. A concave bronze bowl with etched concentric circles and Hebrew lettering, now missing. The possibility thus arises that the Templars not only retrieved relics from beneath Jerusalem, but also intentionally obscured their provenance. Items were absorbed into European monasteries, miscatalogued, renamed, or sequestered under ecclesiastical secrecy. In some instances, they were attributed to miraculous origins, disconnected from any earthly source, conveniently circumventing the question of their true beginnings. Yet, clues persist. One recurring symbol in Templar architecture, an 8-pointed star encircling a square, lacks an official doctrinal explanation. However, when overlaid onto certain 11th century floor plans of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, this star aligns precisely with a central point long considered inaccessible. Could it have marked a vault, a hiding place? A larger question is now emerging, interwoven from the preceding discussions. If the Templars discovered something beneath the mount, some object or document of immense theological weight, what did they do with it? Why the silence? Why not establish their entire reputation around it? The answer may very well be fear. It is widely known that the Church, even then, harbored anxieties about challenges to its carefully constructed narrative. Artifacts that contradicted doctrine, or worse, confirmed suppressed knowledge, would not have been paraded through cathedrals. They would have been hidden, sealed, or misfiled. The Templars, despite their growing fame, remained instruments of larger ecclesiastical powers. If they recovered something that proved a link between Christianity, Judaism, and older pagan cosmologies, that would indeed have posed a significant problem for everyone. One scholar, more curious than cautious, once described the Templar silence as the most articulate scream in history. He might be correct, yet there is still more to ponder. Among the few items attributed to the Templars, but lacking an origin, is a crude stone disc etched with parallel lines, discovered in a Templar commandery in Portugal. Some dismissed it as a wheel of fortune, while others noted its similarity to Assyrian star charts. A recent digital scan revealed microscopic deposits of limestone, identical to those found exclusively in caves beneath Jerusalem. Coincidence? Perhaps. But if we are candid, the pattern is beginning to crystallize. Objects appear, records vanish, maps hint, motifs recur, and always, the vaults of Jerusalem remain just beneath the surface. You can sense it, can't you? The air thickening, the mystery tightening like a drawstring. It is not merely what they found, but what they deliberately refused to articulate. And yet somewhere out there in a monastery, a museum storeroom, or a private collector's vault, there may still be something that was once extracted from the earth beneath the Temple Mount. If you were to hold it in your hand, it might not gleam with gold. It might instead hum. Somewhere, in the back of a dusty museum drawer in Amman, Jordan, lies a riddle etched into metal. Unlike the fragile parchments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this one is made of copper, battered, oxidized, yet enduring. It offers no prayers, nor does it recount visions. Instead, it meticulously lists locations, hidden places, vaults, and treasures. Real, quantifiable treasure, not symbolic salvation or spiritual grace. Pounds of gold, bars of silver, sacred vessels, coded directions, and one entry that has consistently captivated certain historians. In the cistern beneath the council chamber, there are only a few places that phrase could denote, and one of them is unequivocally the Temple Mount. The copper scroll was discovered in 1952 near Qumran, not far from the Dead Sea. Most scholars concur it dates back to the Second Temple period, possibly around the time of the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. However, unlike other Dead Sea documents, this one does not offer theology. It provides coordinates, depths, and markers. Its tone is more akin to an emergency manual than scripture. Its author was not attempting to inspire. They were striving to preserve. Herein lies the crux. Among the 64 entries on the scroll, at least 4 mention features that appear to correspond with underground structures beneath the Temple Mount. One passage reads, "In the underground passage that is in the courtyard north of the gate." Another references a point beneath the stone of offerings east of the water conduit. If these phrases seem vague, it is only because time has obscured the landmarks. But to someone intimately familiar with Herodian Jerusalem, and particularly to a group with access to ancient maps or temple blueprints, they would be unequivocally clear. This is where the Templars re-enter the narrative. No evidence directly links the Templars to the Copper Scroll. How could it, as it was not discovered until the 20th century? Yet, there is a peculiar resonance, a series of convergences. The Templars excavated in the same areas the scroll describes. They lingered in Jerusalem, long after other crusaders had departed. They exhibited an unusual fascination with water systems, aqueducts, and cisterns, and a particular interest in specific subterranean points beneath the Temple Mount, especially around areas where Roman records placed council chambers and treasury halls. Here is a controversial interpretation, whispered by a few modern scholars and largely dismissed as romantic speculation, that a copy of the Copper Scroll, either oral or written, existed long before 1952, that Jewish exiles or early Christian mystics transmitted fragments of its contents, and that these fragments may have reached Europe. If this indeed occurred, then the Templars, particularly those with esoteric inclinations, could have followed its trail directly back to Jerusalem. One obscure but compelling hint originates from a letter written by a 13th century Cistercian abbot. He mentions a map inscribed in flame and etched in copper said to be housed within a Templar preceptory in Gascony. While the passage could be allegorical, The phrasing is strikingly specific, and the mention of copper in relation to treasure maps is almost unprecedented, save for this instance. Whether or not the Templars had access to the scroll or something analogous, they acted as if they did. They dug with discernible purpose, searching in patterns that suggest prior knowledge, and as previously noted, they departed without any openly declared findings, yet everything in their circumstances dramatically shifted. A quiet callback emerges now. Recall that Coptic manuscript, mentioning the brass vessel inscribed with stars. It may not be the copper scroll, but the imagery overlaps in unsettling ways. Brass, stars, hidden beneath the dome, a vessel intended not to pour, but to point. Scholarly debate persists regarding whether the copper scroll is a factual account or a fantasy. Some propose it was a priestly ruse designed to mislead Roman looters. Others contend it represented a genuine, desperate attempt to safeguard Jewish temple wealth from destruction. However, one point is clear. Someone believed that Jerusalem still concealed immense material treasure, not merely metaphorical holiness. And if the Templars, equipped with maps, legends, and a considerable degree of audacity, followed even fragments of that belief into the bedrock of the mount, then the copper scroll might not merely be a postscript to their story, it might be their starting point. Imagine it now, one night, torch in hand, unrolling a copy in some candlelit chamber, words gleaming on hammered copper, dust rising from beneath ancient stones, and the faint sound of trickling water somewhere deep below. One might not expect to discover clues in the writings of their presumed adversaries. Yet, the most detailed early accounts of what lies beneath the Temple Mount originate not from Christian monks or Jewish scribes, but from Muslim chroniclers, men who traversed those same paths, prayed in those identical spaces, and transmitted stories of the chambers below. These were not metaphorical descriptions, but accounts of real vaults, genuine doors, and tangible echoes beneath the stone. During the early Islamic period, particularly under the Umayyads and later the Abbasids, the Temple Mount was not only revered, but actively explored. The dome of the rock itself was constructed with profound reverence for the stone beneath it, which Muslims believe to be the Sakra, the very foundation stone of the world. Beneath this sacred site lay what medieval Islamic sources termed al-Magar, the cave. To this day, pilgrims descend a short staircase inside the dome to access a dimly lit chamber known as the Well of Souls, its low ceiling resonating with acoustics. However, it is what lies beyond this chamber that sparked ancient curiosity. One established fact originates from the 10th century geographer al-Muqaddasi, who wrote that beneath the rock were vaults sealed by God himself, known only to those chosen. Other texts, such as those by Ibn al-Adim and later al-Suyuti, refer to chambers beneath Al-Aqsa that were closed by the ancients and marked with signs only the initiated would read. These were not mere poetic metaphors. They described measurable spaces, blocked by stone or sand, whose origins had long since been forgotten even within the Islamic world. There is an obscure mention in a lesser-known commentary by the 14th century scholar al-Qazwini. He recounts a passage that led from the western wall down to the foundations, where a chamber shaped like a square star housed the names of the prophets etched in gold and buried in silence. This description is tantalizing. A star-shaped room echoes the same Templar architectural motifs observed centuries later in Europe. Coincidence or echo? The scholarly debate persists. Were these writings describing natural caves, Herodian-era constructions, or something even older, perhaps hidden chambers dating to the First Temple period? And if the Templars had access to these same stories, or were guided by those who knew them firsthand, could they have utilized this knowledge to direct their own excavations? You may recall the foreign monks who moved through the ground like ants beneath the dome mentioned earlier. That phrase was not merely colorful, it likely constituted a reference to actual activity, with early medieval Muslim witnesses observing peculiar patterns of movement beneath their sacred space. At that time, the Templars had claimed the mosque above, but it was their activities below that elicited quiet alarm. A recurring tension is evident in these Islamic sources, reverence coupled with warning. The chambers beneath were deemed sacred but sealed, marked but off-limits. The notion of intrusion, particularly by outsiders, was disquieting. Yet, the Templars dug boldly, systematically, almost as if they believed they were entitled to whatever resided there. Modern Muslim authorities have maintained strict limitations on archaeological access to the area, citing religious sanctity and perhaps a degree of apprehension, fear of disturbance, fear of discovery, fear of what might transpire if someone were to locate and open one of these ancient vaults. An unauthorized excavation in 1981, near the southwest corner of the Temple Mount, revealed an unusual stone passage sealed with masonry, atypical of Ottoman or Crusader styles. It was abruptly reinterred, and the site resealed. To this day, its alignment has never been explained, but it matches a directional description found in a 13th century Mamluk manuscript, describing a passage once used by men of the cross, now sealed as a warning. The idea of forbidden chambers, hidden yet mapped, sealed yet known threads through Islamic texts like a faint pulse beneath the city. And if the Templars consulted with local scholars, or even bribed their way into knowledge once passed among mystics, they would have followed these pulses like a trail. A callback now arises. That brass vessel inscribed with stars, once mentioned in a Coptic account. Imagine it held against the floor of a hidden chamber, aligning with points of energy or sound, like some ancient spiritual compass. If such tools existed, and the Templars believed in them, perhaps they were not merely searching blindly, they were resonating with the silence. And perhaps, in those dark corridors beneath Al-Aqsa, they located the entrance the Muslims had long sealed, long feared, and long forgotten. A gate not intended to be opened, but opened nonetheless. If there exists one object capable of unraveling both faith and history in a single breath, it is the Ark of the Covenant. This gold-plated enigma, part altar, part weapon, part divine transmitter, has captivated the world's imagination for millennia. Most consider it a myth. Some assert it vanished with the Babylonians. Others claim it lies interred in Ethiopia. However, a quieter theory persists in certain academic circles, behind closed doors and expressed with careful phrasing, that the Ark never departed Jerusalem at all, that it was hidden, protected, not by priests but by warriors, and that those warriors were the Knights Templar. This theory transcends a mere relic chase. It is rooted in something remarkably methodical. The Templars' early obsession with the Temple Mount was not spiritual tourism, it was surgical. They precisely targeted the same zone believed to have housed the Holy of Holies, the chamber where the Ark was once kept. Their headquarters stood directly above it. Their excavations tunneled directly toward it. They did not guess, they aimed. Here is the historical foundation. According to the Mishnah, a second chamber was constructed below the Holy of Holies after the destruction of the first temple. This chamber was intended to safeguard sacred items during periods of crisis. Rabbis of the 2nd century wrote that the Ark had been hidden in a deep place below the sanctuary, not carried away, not destroyed, but concealed. The phrase employed is makum tamun, a concealed place. Fast forward 1,000 years. 9 knights enter Jerusalem. They are granted quarters on the Temple Mount. They commence digging in locations long associated with Solomon's temple, and soon thereafter, they ascend to become Europe's most powerful order. Again, the silence serves as the most resounding clue. What if they discovered it? An obscure detail emanates from a 17th century Italian Jesuit scholar named Father Demizio de Osce, who published a curious reference to an object of unspeakable origin once sealed in the city of Zion and touched only by the priests of the sword. Scholars dismissed it as allegorical, yet the phrase "priests of the sword" is rare and unmistakably evocative of the Templars. Another hint lies concealed within their architecture. In several Templar churches across Europe, including the renowned Temple Church in London, there is an unusual motif: 2 lions flanking an empty box. The lions, of course, are biblical guardians. The empty box is often considered merely decorative, yet, in Hebraic tradition, the Ark was protected by cherubim, not lions, though medieval Europe frequently conflated the two. The imagery may not be precise, but the echo persists. Then there is the unanswered question, one that continues to subtly fuel theological debate. If the Templars did indeed find the Ark, why did they not utilize it? Why did they not display it, converting half the known world and wielding it as proof of divine favor? The answer, perhaps, is simpler than legend suggests. What if they simply could not? Some theorists propose that the Ark was not a relic to be exhibited, but a device to be understood, a sacred engine, coded, dangerous, and profoundly misunderstood. The biblical accounts describe men who perished simply by touching it. Perhaps the Templars realized that mere possession was not synonymous with power. Perhaps they sealed it away again, fearing what might occur if it fell into the wrong hands, or even their own. Listen for a whisper of a callback here. The foundation stone beneath the dome of the rock, the Sakra, was said to cover a void, a hole. Some Islamic traditions claim it leads to the abyss. Others call it a gateway to paradise. However, one medieval Jewish text refers to it as the mouth of the deep, the very term used in reference to the Ark's original hiding place. And the Templars, they spent years beneath that stone. You can feel the chill now, can't you? The hush of something ancient, hidden not for glory but out of necessity, not buried in conquest but entombed in fear. Perhaps the Ark was not a treasure they stole. Perhaps it was a secret they kept. They were drawn on vellum, the edges brown and brittle. Some were simple, resembling sketches exchanged among squires in torch-lit halls. Others were ornate, painted with pigments derived from crushed lapis lazuli and gold leaf. All of them shared an impossible quality. They depicted Jerusalem with an intimacy and precision far too advanced for the era in which they were created. These were the maps attributed to the Templars' charts that delineate, with eerie accuracy, details about subterranean passages beneath the Temple Mount that would not be confirmed for centuries. One such document, known only as the Montgarde manuscript, was discovered in the private collection of a defrocked French bishop in the 1800s. It contained a cross-shaped diagram of Jerusalem, annotated in Latin and Old French. The focal point of the page was a stylized rendering of the Temple Mount, from which extended several fine lines, some terminating in arrows, others marked with cryptic words like descensus, arcus, and clavis. Scholars initially dismissed it as symbolic, but then, quite unintentionally, a British survey team in the 1,860 seconds confirmed the existence of a tunnel precisely where one of those arrows pointed. The team had rediscovered what the Templars may have already known. This constitutes the well-documented historical core. In 1867, a British engineer named Charles Warren conducted one of the earliest systematic surveys beneath the Temple Mount. He unearthed vertical shafts, ancient water channels, and blocked passageways that had not been seen for generations. His diagrams astonished European historians. However, for a select few Templar scholars, they felt more like confirmations. As rumors had long circulated about the Jerusalem packet, a term used to describe a set of lost Templar documents smuggled out of the city during the fall of the Crusader kingdom. Some claimed they had been sent to Portugal, others that they were buried in France. One thread led to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, where a carved pillar bears geometric patterns that remarkably mirror the layout of Warren's maps, an odd synchronicity that has fueled decades of speculation. Let us now consider a curious detail found in the Templar church at Tomar, Portugal. Above the altar, amidst sculpted warriors and saints, is a frieze depicting the Dome of the Rock, centuries before any European artist would have seen it firsthand. Below the dome are lines unmistakably intended to represent tunnels, and at the far right, a key not symbolic, but literal, a large brass key carved into the stone. The Latin inscription reads, Intra antiquum enter by the ancient way. The question that tantalizes scholars is whether the Templars discovered this knowledge themselves or inherited it. Some posit it was possibly preserved by Jewish sects, Eastern Christians, or even pre-Islamic mystics, and found its way into Templar hands. Others suggest the Templars compiled it piecemeal, collaborating with locals, deciphering ancient markings, and sketching as they proceeded. But the level of precision remains unsettling. A controversial theory suggests that the Templars may have stumbled upon architectural records from Herodian engineers' drawings preserved in scroll form or etched in stone. Although no such documents survive today, fragments found in the Cairo Geniza hint at a tradition of temple schematics passed down in secret rabbinical school. If the Templars gained access to even a copy, they would have possessed a blueprint unlike any other. You will recall the earlier mention of the 8-pointed star used in Templar iconography. When superimposed on certain Crusader-era maps, the star's points align with almost absurd accuracy with key subterranean features later verified by modern archaeology. This could be coincidence, but the alignment is precise enough to raise questions about whether the symbol was ever intended to guide rather than merely decorate. And then there is the tantalizing possibility, barely articulated, that these maps were not merely records of what existed. They were instructions, a path, a sequence, a means of entry. What would such a map lead to? A hidden chamber, a buried relic, a vault untouched since Solomon's priests last walked the stones. That is where the debates ignite. Some believe the maps point to nothing more than architectural curiosities. Others, Those who devote more time to examining the peculiar shapes in forgotten chapels believe they were encoded guides, not just of space, but of ritual. You can almost envision the parchment unfurling across a candlelit table, a Templar master pointing with a gloved finger, not to where they would go, but to where they would return. It is easy to imagine treasure as a myth, gold coins glinting in torchlight, jeweled goblets, and dusty chests guarded by ancient curses. But treasure, particularly in medieval Jerusalem, had an address and receipts, ledgers maintained by kings and clerics, inscribed with meticulous entries in Latin and Greek, recorded grain payments, tax collections, tithes, and silver bars, a bureaucratic deluge of parchment and seals, until, quite suddenly, the flow ceased. One undeniable fact is that during the First Crusade and the subsequent decades, massive amounts of wealth flowed through Jerusalem. Donations from Europe, spoils of conquest, ransom payments, and religious offerings inundated the city. These transactions were frequently documented by ecclesiastical officials or monastic scribes. However, by the mid-12th century, precisely when the Templars solidified their control over the Temple Mount, a pattern of silence emerged, not merely a gap in records, but a complete vanishing act. Several scholars have documented that certain archives from the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, specifically those pertaining to treasury receipts and crusader wealth, are conspicuously missing. Entire years are blank. Whole entries appear to have been deliberately expunged. For instance, a 1142 ledger from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre mentions the arrival of 2 crates of sacred vessels and 7 chests of bullion from Acre, intended for redistribution among religious sites. No trace of these items appears in any subsequent inventory, not in Jerusalem, nor in Europe. They simply disappeared. This is where the trail of Crusader gold intersects with Templar secrecy. You will recall that the Templars were granted control of the Temple Mount, but also gained influence over the kingdom's treasury. While not official stewards, they were frequently entrusted with transporting and safeguarding high-value materials. Pilgrims, nobles, and even monarchs deposited funds with them for safekeeping. In essence, the Templars evolved into a medieval banking institution. However, their system left almost no paper trail in its early stages. An obscure but intriguing clue appears in the form of the so-called Sicilian fragment, a scrap of Latin script found in Palermo in the 17th century. It references the red-crossed men who bore the king's silver into the earth, not a vault. The word terra is used here, earth, not cella, not safe house, earth buried. There is a lively debate among historians regarding whether the Templars actively removed wealth from public record to fund secret operations, or whether this was merely poor bookkeeping in a war-torn kingdom. Some suggest mismanagement, others whisper misdirection, but the timing is suspicious. The missing years directly correlate with the Templars' excavation efforts. The funds vanished, the men dug, and no one questioned it because the ones who might have benefited were silent. A callback emerges here, like a coin glinting in the dark. Remember the peculiar references in early Templar maps, words like clavis and descensus. If those annotations marked hidden chambers, it is possible that treasure, not merely relics, was their true payload. Gold was moved not out of Jerusalem, but deeper within. There is also a logistical anomaly. When the Templars rapidly expanded their holdings in Europe, they funded commanderies, fortresses, and entire fleets. Much of this growth was attributed to donations. Yet, the mathematics do not quite align. Even with generous patronage, the speed and scale of their development point to a substantial, undeclared infusion of wealth, as if something had been discovered, something vast, untraceable, and quietly transferred into their trust. Modern treasure hunters naturally embrace this theory. Some dedicate their lives to tracing the presumed path of this vanished hoard. However, they often overlook the simplest, most damning piece of evidence: silence. Records vanish, vaults are sealed, monasteries are rebuilt over old commanderies with no explanation. And when papal auditors demanded access to Templar accounts, they found ledgers riddled with gaps, not lies. There is a term for this: concealment, not of a crime, but of a revelation. The treasure was never lost. It was deliberately erased, not melted into crowns or lent to kings, but stored. And what kind of wealth, one might wonder, would be so valuable that it could never be spent? Only the kind that proves something else. At first glance, the Al-Aqsa Mosque appears untouched by the ravages of time. Its elongated arcades, gentle domes, and shimmering tiles evoke centuries of prayer and pilgrimage. However, beneath this artistry lies something far more engineered, more intentional: subtle alterations, peculiar reinforcements, and architectural anomalies that suggest construction guided not by worship, but by excavation. There is no shortage of historical documentation confirming that the Templars utilized Al-Aqsa as their primary headquarters during their tenure in Jerusalem. They referred to it as Templum Solomonis, the Temple of Solomon, reflecting their belief that they were reclaiming the ground where the original Jewish temple once stood. But beyond their poetic nomenclature lies an uncomfortable truth. They did not merely inhabit it, they fundamentally altered it. One solid historical fact emerges from records by Muslim chroniclers during the Ayyubid period, describing the mosque's condition after the Templars' departure. These accounts mention newly blocked entrances, oddly reinforced walls, and small chambers carved into areas where no chambers had previously existed. While some attributed these changes to wartime damage, others quietly noted a pattern of alterations intended not to preserve the structure, but to obstruct movement below it. A lesser-known French inventory from the 13th century, compiled shortly after Jerusalem fell to Saladin, makes a passing reference to the tunnels walled by the crossbearers, lined with ash and stone beneath the southern cloister. It is a curious line: tunnels, plural, lined with ash, possibly to deter rot or pests, or perhaps to eradicate evidence. But the most intriguing aspect is this: they were walled, not used, not expanded, but sealed. This invites a curious interpretation. If the Templars went to such lengths to seal off areas beneath Al-Aqsa, were they protecting something or preventing others from accessing it? It is one thing to excavate in secret. It is another to meticulously erase one's own trail. This is where academic disagreements arise. Some scholars contend that the Templars merely repurposed existing rooms and corridors, making modifications for storage, prayer, or defense. However, others, particularly those familiar with Crusader-era masonry, observe that several wall seams and bricked-over openings do not align with the style or materials typical of defensive work. These were not fortifications, they were diversions. A callback begins to resonate in the shadows. Recall the cryptic maps attributed to the Templars, some depicting lines running directly beneath the mosque's foundation. Now, juxtapose those maps with these architectural alterations: walled passages, misaligned corridors, false doors. It is as if someone was constructing a maze in reverse, not to enter, but to ensure no one else could follow. Even more puzzling are the dimensions of certain substructures beneath Al-Aqsa. The so-called double gate, now sealed, leads to a long corridor with a staircase that abruptly terminates at a stone wall. Modern imaging suggests that behind it lies a hollow void, precisely aligned with the center of the mosque. A scholar from the 1922 who surveyed the area under British mandate described the passage as a throat choked by silence and wrote that the wall bears scars not of age, but of intent. Why would the Templars construct blockades over their own work, unless, of course, they discovered something worth protecting from everyone, including their successors? And then comes history's strange irony. Saladin, upon retaking Jerusalem, restored Al-Aqsa for Muslim worship, but never reopened the sealed tunnels. He reinforced the bricked walls. He added guards. It is as if even he sensed that something had been disturbed that ought to remain buried. The silence from the Vatican during this period is equally deafening. Despite the significance of Jerusalem's loss, there are no recorded papal demands for an itemized retrieval of relics or documents from Al-Aqsa. No complaints, no questions, just surrender, as though whatever had been sought or found had already been spirited away, or buried so profoundly that not even time could rediscover it. So, when you walk the quiet marble of Al-Aqsa today, you might perceive a slight unevenness in the southern wall, a faint shift in the floor's elevation near the Qibla niche. Nothing overt, nothing disruptive, just enough to suggest that something once passed through here and was never meant to pass again. Not all alterations are intended to be seen, some are intended to be forgotten. The end arrived not with war, but with parchment. In 1307, as the sun ascended over France, the order was already in decline. Across the kingdom, Templar knights were arrested, their possessions seized, their houses raided. What followed was not justice, but a meticulously orchestrated performance. Months of interrogations, hushed threats, and forced confessions, designed not to uncover truth, but to justify a long-planned eradication. Yet, amidst the fervent climate of fear and confession, a few fragments escaped, pointing chillingly back to Jerusalem. One solid fact: during the infamous trials of the Templars conducted by King Philip IV and his agents, multiple knights made fleeting references to a secret guarded in Zion. While much of the testimony was coerced under duress, not all of it originated from torture chambers. Some statements were volunteered during preliminary questioning, offered not as resistance, but as riddles. Brother Jean de Chalon, a senior member of the order, reportedly stated, "No man may claim all we had is lost. Many have escaped, and with them, the things buried beneath the city where we once began." When pressed further, he refused to elaborate, merely asserting, "There are places beneath Jerusalem where only the true see in the dark." At first glance, such statements might appear to be poetic nonsense, monastic flair from a man under immense pressure. However, recurring phrases throughout the transcripts raise pertinent questions. Multiple knights mentioned the place of fire and angels. Others spoke of a vault guarded not by locks but by presences. These are not isolated metaphors. They feel like coded language, transmitted within the order to describe something that could not be explicitly written. The term ignis et custodes, fire and guardians, appears in 3 separate confessions taken in different regions. While some dismiss this as symbolic language referencing spiritual protection, a few scholars suggest it may allude to something literal. The Chamber of the Flame, an old Crusader legend describing a room beneath the Temple Mount where relics were sealed behind veils of flame and prayer. Whether the flame was symbolic or not, the legend consistently tied it to a specific underground vault, one that, curiously, was never officially recorded in any church-sanctioned document. Obscure but telling is a line from a letter found in the Vatican's suppressed Archivum Secretum, allegedly penned by a Dominican observer of the Paris trials. He described one Templar's final testimony as marked by shaking and silence until he muttered of Zion's cradle and the guardian who is not dead but waiting. The note continues, stating that the court dismissed the man as mad. Yet, the phrasing echoes something you may recall. Earlier accounts from Islamic scholars, those referencing sealed chambers beneath Al-Aqsa, also describe presences that deter entry. Guardians, flame, silence. The vocabulary differs, but the architecture of fear is identical. The true enigma lies in why these men, facing death, would invoke Jerusalem at all. By the 14th century, the Templars had not controlled the city for nearly a century. Their final years had been dedicated to managing land, banking systems, and political tensions in Europe. Yet, in their final hours, they reached back not to Rome or Paris or Acre, but to the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. A callback stirs, dusty and sharp. Remember the bricked overpassages in Al-Aqsa, the deliberate obliterations of stone and path? Perhaps these were not mere burial sites of knowledge, but seals, warnings. And perhaps some of the knights who spoke at their trials had not simply heard rumors. Perhaps they had witnessed the vaults with their own eyes. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, uttered very little in his final moments. However, one statement, recorded by a notary moments before his execution, continues to haunt historians. That which we guarded in silence shall remain in silence until the world is ready to hear. It is a profound statement, tragic, mysterious, and quintessentially Templar. What was it they guarded? A relic, a truth, a door. And why, even under the threat of fire, did they refuse to relinquish it? Perhaps the vault beneath Jerusalem was never merely a place. Perhaps it was a promise. The sun filters through a high window in Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, casting angled beams that illuminate the floating dust like stars in orbit. Tourists quietly navigate past candlelit alcoves. Pilgrims weep in silence beside the stone of anointing. And just beyond the bustle, past the staircases and the shrines, lies a chamber few bother to visit. It is quiet there, almost preternaturally, so not because it is forgotten, but because it remembers too much. The Templars held this church in deep reverence. They were not alone, of course. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is venerated by nearly every branch of Christianity, believed to encompass both the site of Christ's crucifixion and his tomb. But for the Templars, it held an entirely different significance. Their rituals, symbols, and structural layouts suggest a layered relationship, part worship, part mapping. One unshakable historical fact: The Templars established their earliest ceremonial presence in this very church, even before they gained full authority over the Temple Mount. Documents from the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem indicate that they were granted access not only to public areas, but also to closed chambers beneath the rotunda spaces, typically reserved for clergy. Yet, the records do not explain why. That absence, however, is filled by a deeply obscure but persistent thread in Templar lore, a belief that a spatial alignment exists between the Holy Sepulchre and a series of tunnels beneath the city. Templar floor plans discovered in later European commanderies display curious triangulations utilizing the Holy Sepulchre, the Dome of the Rock, and a third unknown point marked only with a symbol, a square within a circle, often interpreted as a vault. The idea seems absurd at first glance. However, in 1975, during repairs to the church's western foundation, workers unearthed what appeared to be a narrow shaft descending into bedrock, then abruptly sealed with a stone cap. The Israeli Antiquities Authority photographed it, then quickly reinterred the shaft. No explanation followed. One scholar of medieval geometry observed that the church's internal structure subtly reflects compass alignments not typical of the era. Most Christian churches align east-west toward the rising Sunday. But here, several corridors angle toward the southeast, an alignment that, when projected underground, leads directly beneath the older city walls and toward the base of the Temple Mount. Could it be coincidence? Certainly, or perhaps not. A callback glows faintly here from the cryptic maps discussed earlier. The Montgard manuscript with its radial points emerging from Jerusalem's spiritual heart. If the Templars believed the Holy Sepulchre formed one leg of a sacred triangle, they may have used it not only as a site of worship but as a navigation tool. And then there are the carvings. Near a worn stone pillar in the chapel of Street Helena, there is a barely visible cross etched beside two parallel lines and a starburst. This is not standard iconography. The same symbol, cross, lines, burst, appears on a stone in the Templar chapel at Lyon, France. In both instances, the lines appear directional, and the burst aligns with what scholars believe was once an access tunnel during the Herodian period. An obscure interpretation, offered by a reclusive Cistercian in the 1800s, suggested that the Holy Sepulchre was the marker, not the mine, meaning it served as a celestial and geographic reference point, possibly even a spiritual safeguard positioned above an older sacred structure, long buried and feared, perhaps something the Templars learned from both scripture and stone. Modern archaeologists scoff at these theories. The city's underground is a patchwork of eras. They argue layers of conquest, conflicting directions, but even skeptics admit the difficulty in explaining why so many Crusader-era architectural features subtly reference paths that lead away from the church, downward, always downward. As you stand now in the cool quiet of that lesser-visited chamber, you may perceive the walls pressing with memory, the kind of silence that is not emptiness, but containment. Something once passed through here. Perhaps information, perhaps men, perhaps something far older, not carried in arms but marked in stone. The Holy Sepulchre, to the Templars, was not merely where Christ was buried. It was where the map began. The Vatican Library boasts over 53 miles of shelving, a vast subterranean labyrinth of parchment, vellum, gold leaf, codices, and ancient scrolls, kept under lock and key and the immense weight of time. Some rooms are accessible to scholars, most are not. And buried deep within these catacombs, accessible only with direct papal permission, lie the infamous Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, the Vatican's secret archives. It is here, according to persistent whispers, that the final word on the Templars was buried, not to preserve history, but to contain it. The established historical record is clear. Following the dissolution of the order in 1312 by Pope Clement V, under enormous pressure from the French crown, the Vatican received thousands of confiscated Templar documents. Trial transcripts, letters, inventories, crates of material from across Europe were dispatched to Rome. The official narrative was that the Church sought to investigate and preserve, but what followed was peculiar. Only a fraction of these documents has ever been released. In fact, for centuries, even their existence was denied. It was not until 2001 that the so-called Chinon parchment, a key piece of Templar trial testimony, was accidentally discovered by historian Barbara Frail, misfiled under an unrelated collection. A critical document, suppressed for 700 years, found not through inquiry, but by happenstance. This raises an unsettling question. What else remains buried within? Here is an obscure but telling detail. A Vatican inventory from the early 17th century refers to a box labeled Zionis Recuperatio, the recovery of Zion. The listing contains no descriptive information, no author, no date. It was quietly removed from later catalogs. No trace of it has surfaced since. Scholars familiar with Vatican protocols understand that the archives employ a system of invisible seals, cataloging entries that technically exist but cannot be requested, referenced, or even acknowledged without explicit ecclesiastical clearance. These records are real, but functionally invisible. The Zionis Recuperatio box fits this pattern. Someone knew it existed. Someone decided it should not. Why? Let us revisit a callback that still echoes. The final statements from Templar prisoners referencing vaults beneath Jerusalem, a secret guarded in Zion, the vault beneath the city, the guardian who is not dead. These were not vague, dreamlike testimonies. They were confessions, sealed, copied, and presumably stored. Yet none of them appear in the open record. Many believe that the Vatican holds more than just transcripts. Rumors have circulated for centuries about the Jerusalem pages fragments of a Templar document recovered from the East, possibly detailing a discovery made during their time beneath the Temple Mount. A Jesuit report from 1,625 references scrolls in barbarous Latin, stained with desert soil, describing a lightless chamber and a relic that moaned. The document has never been verified, but the Jesuit's letter, faded and damaged, still exists. And then there is the question of motive. Why would the Church conceal anything that might elevate its own past or validate the sacred relics of its saints? Perhaps the answer is that what was found did not support Church dogma. It complicated it. If the Templars unearthed something that challenged the biblical timeline, exposed a fusion of faiths, or revealed the Ark not as a miracle but as a mechanism, that would necessitate suppression, not celebration. Some claim that Vatican silence is prudence, that nothing of value was hidden, only protected from misuse. Others argue that the very absence of disclosure is its own confession. After all, silence is not neutrality, it is strategy. In 2007, for the 700th anniversary of the Templars' arrest, the Vatican published a small volume of previously unseen trial materials. It was marketed as transparency, but among the few scholars granted access, one reportedly left in tears, whispering only, "They found it, and we buried it." A final point to consider. When Pope Benedict XVI briefly opened the archives to limited scholars, the only area specifically restricted was the section labeled Regesta Avignonia, a collection of papal correspondence from the Avignon papacy, during which many Templar affairs were handled. The restriction made bureaucratic sense, but the refusal to explain the restriction did not. So, we return to the box. Zionis Recuperatio. Was it a ledger, a map, a sealed confession? Or was it something simpler proof that the treasure was not gold, but knowledge, and that some knowledge must never leave the vault? The parchment was creased, torn along the edges, and stained dark with something no archivist dared identify. It was discovered inside a false panel behind the altar of a ruined Cistercian abbey in southern France during a lightning storm in 1894. A worker found it by accident while repairing storm damage. Initially, no one comprehended its significance. It was merely an old letter written in Latin with spidery ink lines stretching across the bottom like tangled roots. But when a local historian translated the text and compared the sketch with Crusader-era maps, one name leaped from the page: Hugues de Morville, a name etched into Templar history, a grand preceptor of France, a man who vanished without explanation in 1222. What he left behind was more than a letter, it was a confession. The historical record places de Morville as a high-ranking Templar in the early 13th century, stationed for years in Outremer before returning to Europe under vague circumstances. He gave no public speeches, received no known commendations, and never penned any official account of his time in Jerusalem. But his final message, preserved by accident and nearly destroyed by time, speaks of the passage beneath Zion and the 5 turns in darkness, each with a guardian carved in stone. This passage has haunted researchers ever since. The map portion is crude, consisting merely of lines and angles, but one notation stands out: ad lucem in monte, toward the light in the mount. It is positioned at the base of a sketched dome, next to a spiral descending toward what is labeled Arca Custodita, literally, guarded ark. Whether de Morville intended this figuratively or literally remains debated, but the context is chilling. There is a detail here that has fueled debate for decades. A secondary line extending from the spiral toward what is now the Muslim quarter, marked Porticali Gate of Heaven. It aligns roughly with the eastern slope of the Temple Mount. This echoes earlier mentions in Islamic texts about sealed gates and forbidden paths, as well as a curious stone arch beneath the Via Dolorosa, rumored to have been walled up during the Crusader period without explanation. Some scholars believe the entire map is symbolic of pilgrims, a metaphor for spiritual awakening, but others, particularly those who study medieval Templar field tactics and architectural codes, recognize the pattern. Templar maps often employed layered meaning, with spiritual terms masking physical directions. Light referred to open chambers, shadow to sealed vaults. Guardians were often markers, statues, carved faces, or trap mechanisms disguised as decorative reliefs. De Morville's letter makes a cryptic reference to a second vault we dared not enter, for the air wept and our flame died. Many dismiss this as melodrama, but air that extinguishes flame suggests one thing: a sealed chamber with depleted oxygen, real physical conditions. And then, almost as an afterthought, the letter concludes with a chilling farewell. I seal this so others may forget. Let the temple keep what it swore never to reveal. Here's the callback, waiting like a stone underfoot. You will remember the Zionis Recuperatio box in the Vatican's invisible archive, the one entry never explained. If de Morville's letter is authentic, it may have been part of that suppressed package, a roadmap not just to the vaults, but to what lay inside. The letter's authenticity has never been formally confirmed. The parchment was lost during World War I, likely consumed by fire. All that remains is a photograph and the transcript published in an obscure archaeological journal in 1902. But the timing is telling. Within a year of the letter's discovery, the French government halted excavations near the Temple Mount due to diplomatic instability. No one has been permitted to dig there since. Coincidence? Perhaps, but the pattern holds. A map, a warning, a vault too dangerous to open. Perhaps de Morville's silence was not cowardice. Perhaps it was mercy. It faces east, toward the rising sun, sealed by centuries of stone. The Golden Gate, also known as the Eastern Gate, is the most iconic of Jerusalem's 8 gates. Yet, it is the only one that remains completely closed, bricked up, walled in, as if something behind it must never again see daylight. Most tourists merely pass it by. Most guides declare it symbolic. But the Templars, they perceived something entirely different. Historically, the Eastern Gate was associated with prophecy. Jewish tradition held that the Messiah would one day enter Jerusalem through it. Christian apocalyptic texts echoed this claim. Islamic rulers, perhaps in an act of holy countermeasure, sealed the gate in the 9th century, asserting it was to prevent the Messiah's arrival. But the Templars were not content with mere legend. They believed the seal was not only literal, but functional, a solid historical fact. During their occupation of Jerusalem, the Templars allocated significant resources to surveying the area around the Eastern Gate. A Crusader-era map, preserved in the archives of the Doisy Templars, shows disproportionate attention to this eastern wall, with Latin annotations referring to Porta Secreta and Clavis, non-dormant the gate of secrecy, and the stone that does not sleep. Such phrasing suggests far more than poetic musing. It reads like coded language, specific, layered, and deliberate. There is an obscure but intriguing reference in the writings of the German mystic Hildegard of Bingen, who, though not directly affiliated with the Templars, wrote of men who journeyed eastward to the place where the Gate of Dawn holds back the tide of flame. The phrase is cryptic, even for her, but if one strips away the mysticism, it may hint at an underground presence, something volatile or protected, held behind Jerusalem's eastern barrier. So why would the Templars concern themselves with a gate no one could open? Because beneath it, according to several ancient texts, lies one of the city's most mysterious subterranean features: a blocked passage descending toward the Temple Mount, a tunnel never officially mapped but long whispered of in both Jewish and Arab tradition. A 12th century Islamic engineer, writing in a treatise on city defenses, described a hollow under the eastern wall where the echo grows cold and the light will not stay. That line may appear poetic, but for tunnel builders and excavators, it hints at something tangible, a chamber designed to conceal, not to guide. There is a Templar tradition, rarely discussed, that refers to the lock that was never meant to turn. It appears in scattered writings, often in the context of spiritual initiation or trials. But one French manuscript in the National Library of Paris offers a different interpretation. Only those who bear the sign of the builder may cross the threshold of the east. The others see only stone. Some scholars believe this was metaphorical, a reference to spiritual enlightenment. Others suspect it described a literal architectural mechanism, perhaps a secret entrance disguised in plain sight, invisible to the untrained eye. A callback, faint but firm, now resonates. De Morville's map described a secondary route marked Porta Caeli, the Gate of Heaven, leading eastward from the Temple Mount's base. When overlaying that sketch against modern topography, it aligns eerily with the buried levels beneath the Golden Gate. If these passages once connected, then the seal may not be about keeping someone out. It may be about keeping something in. One of the more controversial interpretations comes from a now-banned treatise penned by a 19th century Jesuit who claimed that the Eastern Gate sealing had nothing to do with messianic prophecy. Instead, he argued it was the final veil drawn across the vault of Solomon, a last attempt to prevent a resurgence of the knowledge that unmade Babel. Cryptic, to be sure. But he insisted that beneath the gate lay not treasure, but testimony, something that could rewrite sacred chronology. To this day, the Eastern Gate remains sealed. Efforts to excavate near it are blocked by politics, religion, and unrest. Yet it stands, observing the sunrise as if waiting for someone who understands how to knock in the correct pattern. A bricked wall, a hidden tunnel, and a forgotten lock that once turned just once for the Templars, and after that, never again. Imagine, for a moment, peeling back the surface of the Temple Mount like the lid of an ancient reliquary. Beneath the gleaming dome of the rock and the prayer-worn stones of the courtyard lies an intricate web of corridors, cisterns, chambers, and shafts. Some are natural, others chiseled by human hands over thousands of years. It is not merely a basement, it is a city beneath a city. And the Templars did not simply know it was there. They mapped it, manipulated it, and perhaps, according to certain symmetries, even augmented it. It begins with geometry, a firmly established fact. Ancient builders, particularly those from the Herodian and earlier Solomonic periods, relied on sacred geometry to determine the layout of temple complexes. Lines of symmetry, mathematical ratios, and symbolic proportions were not aesthetic flourishes, they were spiritual laws. The Temple Mount was no exception. The foundation stone at its heart was believed to be the cosmic center, the axis mundi. Everything else, from chambers to stairways, radiated outwards in deliberate order. Fast forward to the 12th century, the Templars established their base directly atop this spiritual epicenter. Almost immediately, they commenced digging, following patterns no one else seemed capable of perceiving. And that is where the strangeness begins. Some of the subterranean corridors they used or accessed beneath the dome of the rock mirrored layouts found in Templar architecture in Europe, particularly in round churches modeled after the Holy Sepulchre. Patterns of 12 repeated arcs, spiral configurations. These were not random echoes, they were deliberate replications. The obscure detail that further substantiates this comes from a now-lost floor mosaic discovered in the 1800s during Ottoman restoration work on the platform's eastern side. A German archaeologist recorded it before its removal. The mosaic featured interlocking circles and squares oriented around a central point, resembling a medieval labyrinth. The design matched the proportions of the famous labyrinth found in Chartres Cathedral, another Templar-connected site. If accurate, this suggests that sacred geometry was not just decoration, but a code, a key to understanding what lay beneath. Let us return to a callback now, soft but sharp, the Templar maps we have examined. Many utilized repeated angles, 22.5 degrees, 45 degrees radiating from the dome itself. Scholars once presumed these were compass errors or artistic liberties, but newer analyses propose something different, alignment with underground cisterns and shafts. When these angles are plotted onto modern scans of the Mount's substructure, the paths intersect at shockingly accurate points, especially around the area directly beneath the foundation stone. One controversial interpretation, proposed by a fringe but persistent group of architectural historians, is that the Templars discovered an unfinished vault system, something begun by Solomon's builders, or perhaps the Hasmoneans, and attempted to complete it not merely with stone, but with ritual symmetry. They were not just digging, they were fulfilling a blueprint. And here is where the theory darkens. A 14th century Cistercian manuscript, only partially translated, makes an eerie claim. The mount bore the pattern, but the vault bore the memory. Only through union of the two does the door reveal itself. This has been interpreted as esoteric babble until one scholar noted that the Latin word forma used in the text could mean both pattern and temple layout. Was the door a real entrance, and the pattern the geometric code that could unlock it? Beneath the dome, a small chamber known as the Well of Souls hums with peculiar acoustics. Tourists visit it today, often unaware that directly above it rests the very rock believed to be the center of creation. The echo in this space is uncanny. Sound appears to hover, amplify, and unnaturally dissipate. Modern engineers attribute it to acoustical resonance, but early Templars may have interpreted it differently as a sign. In fact, several early accounts from Crusader Knights describe this area as the place where the breath of the earth gathers and reference circles without end beneath it. Whether they meant literal circles, corridors, perhaps, or something more conceptual, remains unknown. But those same writings repeatedly return to the number 3. 3 steps, 3 turns, 3 keys. Was it ritual architecture? A riddle? Perhaps all 3. One more thread to pull. A recently declassified British Mandate-era survey included notes on a small sealed chamber directly beneath the northeast corner of the dome's platform. The report described it as architecturally inconsistent with surrounding construction, containing faint spiral etchings not seen elsewhere. The chamber was immediately reinterred. So we ask, what is buried in that spiral stone? Air? Memory? Or is it the same pattern, the same symmetry, echoing back what the Templars believed, that the vaults of Jerusalem were never meant to be discovered through brute force? Only geometry would unlock them. It began with ledgers, long, monotonous rows of numbers, tithes, shipments, taxes, donations, Crusader accounts, meticulously inscribed by monks with aching wrists and tidy Latin script. For decades, the flow of wealth into Jerusalem was steady and transparent. Silver from Venice, gold from Aragon, spices, silks, sacred artifacts. But then, precisely as the Templars reached the zenith of their power in the Holy Land, the numbers faltered. Not because the money ceased to arrive, but because it ceased to be recorded. A financial black hole opened beneath the city, and in its silence, the legend of the Jerusalem hoard began. We commence with one established truth. The Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem maintained meticulous financial records, particularly concerning donations for the upkeep of churches and the Crusader army. These were logged at various monastic centers, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the treasury at Street Mary Major. Yet, sometime between 1168 and 1183, a series of major entries simply vanish. Transactions known to have occurred, thanks to receipts found in European abbeys, appear nowhere in Jerusalem's accounts. For example, a donation of 1,000 silver marks from the Count of Champagne in 1174 is recorded in French Cistercian logs, but never mentioned in local Jerusalem inventories. Another discrepancy surrounds a fleet from Pisa, known to have delivered a cargo of gold and iron ingots to the port of Jaffa, none of which appear in any surviving Eastern record. It is as if, after landing, the wealth was utterly absorbed. Obscure details emerge when we consider the internal memos of the order. Fragmentary correspondence between Templar commanderies in Sidon and Acre refers to a transfer through the conduit of Zion and instructions to count nothing twice, for what is hidden is already tithed in silence. These phrases are elusive, but suggest a deliberate rerouting of funds, perhaps into storage not intended to be seen or even remembered. So, what transpired with the hoard? One interpretation is logistical. The Templars, fearing future instability in the city, may have begun stockpiling wealth in hidden vaults. These were not bank deposits, they were disappearances. They ceased recording certain transfers, not because they were lost, but because they were no longer meant to be found. A callback now to the bricked-up tunnels beneath Al-Aqsa. If certain chambers were sealed by the Templars themselves, might they not have contained something more than relics? Gold would be a burden during a retreat, but if strategically hidden, it could be retrieved decades or even centuries later. Some scholars have even proposed that the wealth used to fuel the Templars' meteoric rise in Europe was not drawn from donations, but from buried funds retrieved after their departure from the Holy Land, that they returned in secret, exhumed their own reserves, and converted hidden coins into commanderies and fleets. A curious story from the 1200s lends this theory an intriguing breadth. A monk at the Abbey of Clairvaux recorded the sudden arrival of strange Eastern chests, adorned in no heraldry, but bound in iron with locks of unusual shape. The contents were never described, but their arrival coincides with a surge in land acquisition by the Templars in the Champagne region. No known donor is listed. Then there is the legend, a persistent, whispered tale known as La Mise de Jerusalem, French for the staking of Jerusalem. It refers not to a military defense, but a financial one. The idea that the Templars, having realized they might one day lose the city, buried its sacred and monetary wealth like gamblers hedging a final bet. If they lost the city, the treasure remained hidden. If they returned, they would claim it all, not for kings, not for Rome, but for the order. The term appears in a 17th century memoir by a Carthusian monk who claimed access to an Eastern scroll written in Old Latin and Greek, speaking of a vault beneath the mountain, sealed not with mortar but with oath. He quotes a phrase that lingers in the mind. Only by silence will it remain gold. Modern attempts to locate this so-called hoard have failed spectacularly, not least because the Temple Mount remains almost entirely off-limits to excavation. Probes, scans, and drills are blocked by religion, politics, and centuries of resistance. And so the silence remains intact, not accidental, not empty, but engineered. Here is the twist that interweaves everything. If the Jerusalem hoard was real, and if it still lies hidden beneath the city, then the Templars did not fail when they lost the Holy Land. They succeeded by vanishing with the most powerful secret of all, still buried beneath their feet. It was not the Templars who sealed the vaults, not entirely. They may have excavated them, they may have mapped them, they may even have concealed something within. But centuries later, long after the last Red Cross had vanished from Jerusalem's streets, another power arose, one that feared what lay below, the Mamluks. These former slaves, who became sultans, controlled Jerusalem after the fall of the Crusader kingdoms. And they did not simply inherit the city, they modified it silently, thoroughly, especially beneath the surface. A clear historical record confirms that the Mamluks initiated numerous architectural projects on and around the Temple Mount beginning in the 13th century. They constructed schools, mosques, prayer niches, and elevated platforms. But it is what they undertook underground that has consistently raised questions. Reports from early Ottoman and European travelers describe areas with recently walled tunnels, passages filled with earth, and entryways that led nowhere. The timing is crucial. These closures began shortly after the disappearance of the Templars from the region. One well-documented case involves the subterranean passage near the double gate on the southern wall of the mount. During the Mamluk era, this corridor, previously open, was not only sealed, but filled with rubble and religious debris. There was no structural necessity, no signs of collapse, just deliberate obstruction. The Mamluks were not expanding, they were concealing. There is an obscure inscription above a blocked stairwell near the gate of the chain, chiseled in Arabic calligraphy. It reads, "By his will, we close what others defiled." Most interpret this as symbolic, an act of reclaiming religious space. However, some scholars argue it marked an actual closure of a subterranean space that had been breached during the Crusader occupation, perhaps even a chamber the Templars had once utilized. Why would the Mamluks, proud of their Islamic heritage and confident in their rule, care about closing ancient vaults? Here lies the twist. Several Islamic texts from this period, especially those circulated within Sufi orders, speak of places in the stone that echo with danger, places not unholy, but powerful sites where divine energy was disturbed and consequently had to be resealed. These mystical warnings, often poetic in form, refer to the mouths of the sleeping ones and wells that whisper not water but warning. You may faintly recall from earlier the accounts of airless vaults, of flames that would not burn, descriptions that match Templar testimonies during their trials. Could the Mamluks have rediscovered these same spaces? Perhaps they found them open, or worse, half open, and what they witnessed inside terrified them enough to seal them completely. In 1320, a Moroccan traveler named Ibn Battuta recorded a curious episode. He described a guide taking him near the Dome of the Rock, then warning him not to descend a nearby stairwell. "They say the breath of Iblis dwells below," the guide whispered, refusing to elaborate. This fear was not metaphorical, it was architectural. That stairwell, now gone, was later confirmed by British surveyors to have once led to a Herodian-era water shaft. One controversial interpretation, often dismissed by conventional scholars, suggests that the Mamluks were not simply sealing up old Crusader passages. They were reinterring something. There are local legends still recounted in parts of East Jerusalem about the black boxes, tales of objects once found beneath the mount, covered in cloth, sealed in wax, and reburied deeper than before, always accompanied by warnings. Don't dig, don't disturb, don't awaken. These may be just stories, but the Templars were known to leave cryptic markings. And in 1910, a fragment of red-painted stone was found during renovations near the Al-Aqsa compound, bearing a strange symbol, a cross within a circle, wrapped in a braid. It was quickly removed and has never resurfaced. Some say it matched iconography found in Templar strongholds in France. Others say it was nothing more than graffiti. But what if the Mamluks perceived it differently? Perhaps they believed that the Christians had tampered with forces older than any single faith. Perhaps, in their eyes, the Templars were not thieves but trespassers, and the only solution was to bury what had been uncovered. Again, not lost, not forgotten, just reinterred deeper this time, beneath layers of stone, layers of prayer, layers of silence. You step into the center of the Temple Mount. Beneath you is the rock, not a metaphor, not a symbol, the foundation stone, the navel of the world, some called it. The place where creation began. For Jews, it was where God formed Adam and where Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac. For Muslims, it was from here that the prophet ascended into heaven. But to the Templars, it was something else entirely, a gate, a key, and perhaps the culmination of a cipher only a select few ever truly comprehended. Let us begin with what is visible. Directly beneath the dome of the rock lies a small chamber known as the Well of Souls. Descend the narrow staircase, and you will find yourself in a round room carved directly into the bedrock. The ceiling is low, the air is thick, and the acoustics are peculiar. Whisper, and it echoes back to you, not once but twice, in different tones. Some say the room is a natural cavity. Others argue it was carved intentionally, though by whom no one agrees. One solid historical fact: the Templars controlled this site for nearly 80 years. During that time, they were the only European force with continuous access to the foundation stone and its immediate surroundings. They did not merely pass through, they lingered. They constructed staircases, they reinforced walls. And in one now vanished Crusader chronicle, it is claimed they marked the stone with the symbol of the word, though no such mark has ever been found. Or perhaps it was erased. Here is where matters become unusual. In the 1990 seconds, a team of Islamic scholars studying ancient graffiti within the Well of Souls documented over 60 inscriptions in various languages: Arabic, Greek, Armenian, even Latin. Most were prayers. Some were simply names. But one series of marks stood out: a spiral, a T-shaped glyph, and 3 dots arranged in a triangle. This configuration did not match any known religious motif. But when the shapes were overlaid on certain Templar seals, the resemblance was uncanny. A cipher, perhaps. We gently recall now the claim made by de Morville in his letter. The passage beneath Zion. 5 turns in darkness, the guardian carved in stone. Could this chamber have been part of that path? Was the spiral a physical space or a code to follow? An obscure but fascinating manuscript in the Bodleian Library at Oxford contains a reference to Petra Quae Respondit, the stone that responds. It speaks of a ritual involving vibration, echo, and breath, utilized to awaken the gate beneath the altar. The language is vague, steeped in symbolism, but the phrase respondit is peculiar. Not merely the stone that speaks, but the stone that answers. The foundation stone, in many traditions, is believed to cover a void, a space beneath the earth, where the waters of chaos are held back. In Islamic tradition, it is said the stone attempted to rise and follow the prophet during his ascent, and had to be held down. In Jewish texts, it covers the abyss. In both cases, it is more than a rock. It is a seal. And the Templars, they incorporated geometry into their churches that mirrored this space. Circular chambers, elevated platforms, radiating arches. Rosslyn Chapel again whispers its symmetry. But here in Jerusalem, it was not merely mimicry, it was interaction. Ritual geometry designed to resonate with the rock itself. A callback now to the sealed chamber described in the British Mandate Report. Spiral etchings not seen elsewhere. Could those lines mirror the spiral glyph found in the Well of Souls? Could it be that beneath the foundation stone lies not just a vault, but a mechanism? And if it is a mechanism, what does it open? There is, tucked away in a forgotten commentary by a 14th century Italian mystic, a chilling line. The vault opens not with a key but with understanding. When the stars align in pattern, the gate will listen. Stars, patterns, resonance. These are not the tools of conquest. They are the tools for unlocking something ancient, buried not just beneath stone, but beneath meaning. What did the Templars find beneath the rock? Perhaps not treasure, perhaps not a relic, perhaps something stranger, a map that speaks only in echoes. The crypt emanated the scent of damp stone and forgotten incense. Beneath the heart of London's Temple Church, where circular walls echo the very architecture of Jerusalem, a discovery was made in 1861 that barely garnered newspaper headlines. A small, sealed chamber, hidden behind a crumbling wall in the crypt, was accidentally opened during structural repairs. Inside, they found a few dusty bones, rusted tools, and a box. The box was small, iron-bound, and secured with a complex mechanism. Within it lay a bundle of parchment wrapped in decayed velvet. Most of the papers were brittle and illegible, but one piece survived. A single strip of lambskin scrolled in red ink with a solitary Latin phrase, Ex Sion Venerant. From Zion they came. This clue, as strange and cryptic as it was, would quietly ignite one of the most obscure theories in the long shadow of the Templars, that after the fall of Jerusalem, not all of the Order's secrets were lost. Some were smuggled out, some were hidden in plain sight, and some, it seems, were buried again beneath European soil. The Templars had always maintained a connection to Temple Church, their spiritual home in England. The circular nave, modeled after the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, was more than symbolic, it was functional. Historians have long noted its unusual alignment and subterranean complexity, with passageways and hidden crypts discovered even into the 20th century. But the 1,861 vault, the one bearing the Zion clue, was distinct. It had not been disturbed for centuries. There is a curious detail here, often overlooked. The same chamber contained a small fragment of a bronze plate. Experts dated it to the 12th or 13th century, and upon cleaning, discovered an engraving, a design of concentric rings, like a spiral or labyrinth, surrounding a central 8-pointed star. This exact configuration, a star within rings, had been observed before, on the floor of a Portuguese Templar chapel, and once in a sketch allegedly made by a French crusader describing the layout beneath the Temple Mount. A callback, soft and deliberate, resonates. You will remember the spiral found beneath the foundation stone and the pattern said to resonate like a map. Now that same motif, an 8-pointed star encircled, surfaces beneath a Templar church in England, thousands of miles from Jerusalem. Could it be coincidence? Possibly. But if not, then what was the link? Some believe the vault was part of an emergency relocation plan, a post-fall safeguard enacted by surviving Templars. According to a controversial theory proposed by historian Elias Markham, remnants of the order made quiet landings on the English coast in the early 14th century, carrying not just documents but objects, relics, fragments, and perhaps instructions encoded in geometry. One line in the lambskin strip provokes endless debate. Beneath the Ex Sion Venerant inscription are 3 faint letters, CVR. Their meaning remains unknown. Some claim it is an abbreviation for Custodes Verum Regni, Guardians of the True Kingdom. Others argue it is a cipher key, possibly connected to a larger, now lost document. But those 3 letters have appeared in one other place, etched on a wooden beam in a Templar farmstead in northern France, now collapsed and forgotten. And then there is the oddest element of all. Among the papers in the vault was a faded sketch, merely a corner fragment, but it depicts a wall, a sloping tunnel, and an archway labeled Arcta Interior. It is insufficient to pinpoint a location, but it resembles older maps of the Well of Souls beneath the dome of the rock. In other words, it might have been a drawing of something they saw, something they left, and something they never intended to retrieve. The existence of this vault was kept quiet. After an initial assessment, the documents were removed, stored by the Inner Temple authorities, and never displayed again. When inquiries were made in the 1,950 seconds, officials denied the event ever occurred. But a single photograph survives, a grainy image of the open box and the rolled parchment, taken just before the chamber was resealed. No one has reopened it since. So, what did the Templars transport from Zion to London? A fragment of treasure, a ciphered plan, or perhaps merely a warning? Whatever it was, They buried it in a round church under British stone. And in that silence, they may have left us a final clue. There is a fundamental reason why no one excavates beneath the Temple Mount. It is not merely religious tension or bureaucratic red tape. It is fear plain, ancient, and institutional fear. Fear of collapse, of unrest, of what might be disturbed. And some say, fear of discovery. Over the past century, the few who have attempted to probe the ground under Jerusalem's holiest site have been stopped, silenced, or buried under a political avalanche. But between the official narratives and the forbidden corridors lies something stranger, a pattern of obstruction that may not be about preservation at all, but about the protection of a secret, one established fact. Since the mid-20th century, nearly all proposed archaeological excavations beneath or adjacent to the Temple Mount have been denied, halted, or reversed, often without clear explanation. Whether proposed by Israeli authorities, international teams, or independent researchers, the outcome is consistent. The ground beneath the mount is off-limits, not just protected, but locked. This was not always the case. During the British Mandate period in the 1920 seconds and 30 seconds, a small number of sanctioned surveys were permitted. Most were conducted under strict religious supervision and limited to surface or architectural assessments. But on more than one occasion, exploratory probes encountered something unexpected. Voids, passageways, and even man-made walls far deeper than anticipated. These discoveries were reported, then forgotten. One such instance involved British engineer Montague Brownlow Parker, who, under a veil of secrecy, led a treasure hunt beneath Jerusalem in 1909. His team reportedly found a sealed tunnel under the dome, but before they could explore it, local riots forced them to flee. The entire episode was quietly suppressed. The official report was never published. An obscure internal memo from the Israeli Department of Antiquities in 1986, only declassified decades later, described a subterranean anomaly beneath the eastern platform consistent with Crusader-era modification. The recommendation: do not pursue. Risk exceeds value. No public follow-up, no excavation, just the file closed. Even the use of non-invasive scanning techniques like ground-penetrating radar or muon imaging has met resistance. Attempts by foreign universities to conduct remote surveys have been rejected on the grounds of political sensitivity. But behind the scenes, insiders hint at a different issue. Prior scans, conducted quietly by state-funded institutions, revealed unexpected chamber alignment. One former technician, speaking anonymously, described open spaces where there should be bedrock, long linear gaps, and one cavity so deep we assumed the machine had malfunctioned. The data was never released. A callback rises from the dust. The blocked stairwell near the gate of the chain, the one with the inscription, "By his will, we close what others defiled." It is not alone. Across the mount, doorways appear in walls only to vanish behind plaster. Air vents lead nowhere. Chambers known from Crusader records, like the supposed Room of the Ark, are now sealed and absent from modern maps. A controversial theory holds that a quiet agreement exists, unstated but absolute, between religious authorities and archaeological bodies. The understanding: don't dig too deep, don't look too long, because whatever lies below could fracture more than stone. It could overturn everything. You might inquire what could possibly be so perilous beneath the mount that entire governments, faiths, and institutions would conspire to leave it untouched. One answer lies in a suppressed report from 1993, written by a Jordanian antiquities official. The report mentions a series of underground voids identified by seismic resonance near the southeast corner of the platform. One cavity, referred to only as Zone 3, was estimated at 8 meters tall and 12 meters long, and located directly beneath a known Crusader stairwell. The team's request to drill a fiber optic camera borehole was denied. Why? Because, according to a source close to the Waqf, the religious body overseeing the mount, the area was disturbed once before, and it brought nothing but darkness, legend, superstition, or memory. And still, the silence endures. No new surveys, no academic access. The occasional unauthorized dig sparks riots. The press runs a brief piece. Then the earth closes again. A quiet joke among Templar researchers is that the only people who don't want to find the treasure are the ones who already know where it is. Perhaps that is not so far-fetched. Because in a world obsessed with discovery, there remains one place where discovery is not merely discouraged, but actively prevented. And the question you are left with isn't, why won't they let us dig? It's, what are they so afraid we will find? It stands in Scotland like a dream rendered in stone. Rosslyn Chapel, a vortex of sacred geometry and whispered secrets. To most visitors, it represents a medieval anomaly, a carved riddle of Gothic flourishes and floral motifs. But to those who follow the shadow of the Templars, Rosslyn is not a mere footnote. It is a cipher, one that might just echo the deepest vaults beneath Jerusalem. Here is the indisputable fact. Rosslyn Chapel was constructed in the mid-15th century by William Sinclair, a nobleman of the powerful Sinclair family, long rumored to have Templar affiliations. The chapel's construction, symbolism, and unusual architectural choices have confounded scholars for centuries. Nowhere else in Britain exists such an intense concentration of religious, esoteric, and astronomical carvings, many of them seemingly out of place for a Christian chapel in rural Scotland. Among these carvings, one motif stands out, the so-called apprentice pillar. It spirals upward like DNA in stone, flanked by two upright columns, creating an unmistakable echo of the central architecture found in the Well of Souls beneath the Dome of the Rock. The symbolism is striking: the spiral, the twin guardians, the central ascent. It mirrors almost eerily the layout beneath Jerusalem's holy site. One obscure detail strengthens this connection even further. Hidden in the base of the apprentice pillar is a small, 8-pointed star, barely visible unless the light strikes it precisely. It is the same geometric motif found on Templar maps of Jerusalem, the same symbol scratched into the bronze plate discovered in the London Templar vault, not merely decorative, consistent. A Scottish cleric in the 1600s wrote that Rosslyn was a vault built to hold the likeness of that which lies beneath Zion. Most dismissed it as poetic flattery, but what if he meant it literally? What if Rosslyn was not merely inspired by the Holy Land, but encoded it? Recent studies utilizing laser scanning have revealed something even stranger. The layout of the chapel's pillars, altars, and wall reliefs forms a precise overlay when superimposed on known Crusader-era maps of Jerusalem. The spatial relationship between the choir, nave, and crypt align within mere degrees with the Temple Mount, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Golden Gate. This is not aesthetic coincidence. This is architectural cryptography, and it does not stop with layout. Several of Rosslyn's carvings appear to depict plants unknown in 15th century Scotland. Some say American species, others point to desert flora more common in the Middle East. One particularly curious relief shows what appears to be an acacia branch, central to Jewish lore regarding the Ark of the Covenant. Beneath it, a key, simple, angular, facing downward. A callback now, quiet but deliberate, de Morville's lost map. The spiral beneath the mount, the vault sealed by oath. Rosslyn, in this light, begins to resemble not just a chapel but a model, a three-dimensional memory palace designed to preserve knowledge across time, not through writing but through stone. One controversial theory suggests that Rosslyn was the final resting place of something recovered from Jerusalem, an object, a relic, or a piece of the vault's map. In 1835, a local mason uncovered a hollow space beneath the chapel floor while conducting repairs. It was resealed by church authorities before any formal excavation occurred. To this day, the crypt remains closed to public access. Some claim the cavity contains nothing but rubble. Others believe it holds what was taken from beneath the dome and encoded above in carvings for those who possess the understanding to decipher them. And to decipher them, some have indeed tried. A group of symbologists in the 1990 seconds claimed that a series of musical cubes carved into the chapel walls corresponded to a mathematical sequence. When converted into sound, the sequence created a resonant frequency, the same frequency used in acoustic tests beneath the Temple Mount. Coincidence, perhaps? Or perhaps the chapel was intended to hum with the memory of what once vibrated in the darkness beneath Zion. So, what is Rosslyn? A chapel, a vault, a replica, or a cipher waiting to be aligned with its original twin beneath Jerusalem? Whatever the answer, one truth lingers in the carvings, the shadows, and the silence. The Templars did not just dig and hide, they remembered, and they left their memory in stone. History indicates that the Templars definitively departed Jerusalem in 1291, driven out with the fall of Acre, their last stronghold in the Holy Land. Their banners were lowered, their commanderies dismantled. Yet, whispers persist, quiet fragments, accounts of robed men seen at old pilgrimage sites, of strange markings appearing decades after the Crusades had concluded, and of tunnels sealed, then unsealed, then sealed again. What if the Order never truly abandoned Jerusalem? What if they returned? There is a well-documented fact that casts the first shadow. In 1306, just 1 year prior to the mass arrests in France, the Templars chartered a series of merchant vessels that sailed from the western coast of Cyprus, ostensibly bound for Venice. But the ships vanished from the records. No arrival, no cargo logs, no wreckage. Some historians assert they were lost to storms. Others believe they sailed under false flags. However, a handful of Arabic records from coastal Levantine towns mention the arrival of foreign traders who spoke no local tongue, but paid well in silver coins, stamped with crosses and unfamiliar crests. One Syrian merchant wrote in a 14th century account, "They came seeking stone, not silk, stone, not silk, a curious commodity to seek in a city renowned for shrines." The idea that the Templars, or a fragment of them, returned to Jerusalem long after their public collapse is supported by more than mere legend. In 1325, a Mamluk tax document obliquely refers to Franks appearing by night in the ruined halls of the Mount, who were chased off, but not apprehended. A security report from a Jerusalem Qadi that same year described a small band of armored men bearing a white banner with a blood-red flame, not a cross, but a flame, perhaps a variant, perhaps a warning. Here is an obscure but compelling thread. The Order of Christ in Portugal, widely believed to be the post-suppression continuation of the Templars, maintained a peculiar tradition. Every year on the Feast of the Ascension, they conducted a private ritual in Tomar, reenacting a journey to the east beneath the stars to awaken the buried fire. It was not symbolic, at least not entirely. The ritual included the unfolding of a tattered linen map depicting 3 gates, a river, and a triangular enclosure labeled only as Petradomi, the stone of the house. A callback arrives like a bell through mist, the ciphers carved into Rosslyn, the hidden spiral beneath the dome, the sealed chamber marked by fire and silence. If a return plan existed, it would not have been military. It would have been surgical, quietly executed by those who had memorized what their forebears had once buried. Some believe this return was not a singular event, but a long-standing effort, a generational mission kept alive by a remnant order that no longer commanded castles but held memory. That maps were passed down, not on parchment, but in architecture. That entry points were tested under cover of darkness, utilizing the stars, the geometry, the sound of echoes to navigate spaces, never meant to see the sun again. One cryptic piece of evidence further fuels this theory. In the mid-1500s, a Sufi mystic named Idris al-Khattani wrote of silent pilgrims from the Northmen who sought the breath of the stone that once sang. He described them as gentle, persistent, and strangely well-informed about underground corridors no longer in use. He concluded simply, they were not new to the city. If true, these men may have entered not through force, but through alliance, bribery, or memory. Perhaps they were not wearing armor at all, just robes and quiet eyes. After all, who better to move unnoticed than those the world believed extinct? And if they found what they were seeking, if they reopened even one of the sealed chambers, what did they take? Or more hauntingly, what did they leave? There are stories. A chamber discovered, then resealed with meticulous care. A scroll removed and replaced with another. A box opened only to deposit a warning. Perhaps their return was not about possession, but about protection, not conquest, but continuity. You have followed the trail across centuries, maps etched in secrecy, vaults buried in silence, whispers echoing in Scottish stone and Vatican corridors. Each clue, strange and fractured on its own, begins to take shape in the dim light of a discernible pattern, not myth, not legend, but structure, a buried architecture of intent. The question was never merely what the Templars were seeking. It was what they discovered, and why they never spoke of it. Here is what can now be quietly but clearly traced. The earliest Templars occupied the Temple Mount not primarily to guard pilgrims, but to conduct a search. They tunneled beneath Al-Aqsa, concentrating on specific areas long associated with the Holy of Holies and the foundation stone. Their sudden escalation in wealth and status followed not years later, but almost immediately. Their silence regarding what transpired during those 10 initial years resonates more loudly than any proclamation. We have observed the pattern of concealment. Records vanish, maps reappear in distant lands. Vaults sealed by crusaders are resealed by Mamluks. The geometric echoes, spirals, stars, triangles recur from Jerusalem to Tomar to Roslin. Even the few surviving trial testimonies of the Templars allude to a guardian beneath Zion, and a truth that must await its time. No one states precisely what it was, yet everyone behaves as though they witnessed it. Here is the first controversial, but now plausible, conclusion. The Templars discovered something beneath the Temple Mount. Not treasure in the conventional sense, no crates of gold, no jeweled goblets, but something older, older than the church, perhaps older even than the temple itself. A vault, a chamber, an object, or even a set of inscriptions that carried implications too perilous to reveal. This is where interpretations diverge. Some scholars believe it was the Ark of the Covenant, a relic of unimaginable power and symbolism, hidden in a forgotten recess and confirmed by the temple's original layout. Others argue it was a cache of documents, texts from the First Temple period or earlier, challenging core narratives of divine transmission and sacred chronology. And a more radical camp suggests it was neither relic nor scroll, but a device, something that hummed, resonated, not wholly in the traditional sense, but ancient, functional, and inexplicable. The callback from the Roslin sequence lingers like smoke. The vault opens not with a key, but with understanding. This line may encapsulate the Templars' ultimate discovery, not an item, but a knowledge, an understanding preserved in architecture, transmitted through geometry, and sealed beneath the mount, because it could not be explained, only experienced. And then there is the evidence of return. The anonymous pilgrims, the order's encoded rituals, the shifting clues buried in chapels and commanderies across Europe. It suggests the Templars had not simply hidden something, but designed a network of symbols to one day retrieve it when the world was ready. When the geometry aligned, when the echoes beneath the stone were no longer feared. The final theory, then, is not about gold or kings or ancient curses. It is about architecture, spiritual, physical, and symbolic. It is about silence carefully constructed. It is about the idea that beneath the Temple Mount lies a sealed chamber, still untouched, whose contents remain known to only a few and feared by the rest. And it is about the Templars, who did not lose Jerusalem. They hid something within it and walked away. Now, allow the light to fade. The bustling streets of Jerusalem grow quiet. The day's heat sinks into ancient stone. The air cools. Dust settles on flagstones laid by empires. And beneath it all, far beneath the footsteps, the prayers, the conflict, there is stillness, cold, carved stillness, the kind that emanates only from places long sealed, long forgotten, or perhaps long protected. Close your eyes. Picture the vault, not with torches or dramatic fanfare, but as it truly is, silent, airless, still pulsing with the intent of those who built it. Smooth stone, cut with patience. Geometry aligned with constellations no longer visible through the haze of city lights. The corners offer no echoes, only weight, a breathless kind of waiting. You imagine dust dancing through a sliver of displaced air, disturbed for the first time in centuries, perhaps a breath from a time before, perhaps yours. And now picture the object. Or is it a chamber, a book, a box, a crystal no one knows how to name? You do not need to know what it is, only that it is there, still waiting, sealed behind stone, behind fear, behind every hand that chose silence over revelation. The Templars walked those corridors not as thieves, but as witnesses. They found it, or a part of it, and in that moment they did not conquer it. They left it behind. Whatever they discovered beneath that dome, beyond those vaults, under layers of stone and time, it was not meant for that world, perhaps not even for this one. But you sense it, do you not? That pull, that hum, the echo of something unspeakable beneath the stones, a shape not seen, but remembered. And as the city above begins to sleep, lulled by centuries of prayer and war, the vault remains unmoved, unopened, and waiting still.